Coming in at number 10 today is Galactus. Being one of the constants in Marvel Comics since 1965, Galactus is a big name in comic books, and yet I feel like there's a good chunk of people who may not know his origins. Galactus was known originally as the space explorer Galen from a planet called Ta. The civilization he belongs to was the most advanced of any of the known universes at that time, and Galen was a genetically engineered child of one of Ta's greatest scientists. But Galen and his society existed in the previous iteration of the Marvel multiverse, the Sixth Cosmos. Essentially, in Marvel, the universe starts off as a cosmic egg, or a sphere of disorganized, dense, compact matter. This sphere undergoes a big bang that hurls the matter outwards, where it eventually condenses into stars, planets, moons, and all that good stuff. It all expands in size for billions of years, and then it begins to go in reverse, undergoing a quote crunch over the next billions of years, all heading toward a central point in the universe where it all restarts again. That, or it was a giant entity known as the Black Winter. Either way, Galen and the surviving people of Ta attempted to face the end of the universe by leaving their planet on a ship. Sadly, the cataclysm caught up with the ship and everyone passed except for Galen, who was approached by the sentience of the universe, who merged his power with Galen, allowing him to survive as Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, in the next cosmos. This one. Number 9. Parasite, Joshua Michael Allen. When talking about the origin story of the villain Parasite, there are a few different stories we can tell, but they're all nuts. The most current version of Parasite is a guy who used to go by the name Joshua Michael Allen. Josh was originally a bike courier from Metropolis, but his life changed when he very randomly came face to face with a massive green booger-looking monster. He was having a rough time, and so he kinda snapped, attacking the monster and getting a massive electric shock. He then lost consciousness. When he came to, he was diagnosed as suffering from alien flu. He also lost his job and got dumped by his GF in the same stroke, so that's pretty sad. It was then that he was called into Star Labs to be checked for the virus. All of a sudden, a random explosion at the lab took out everyone nearby and transformed Joshua into a purple grotesque monster called Parasite. As Parasite, he uncontrollably, and suffering from a crazy level of hunger, drained the energy of people around him, leaving them as husks. However, the Man of Steel came to intervene, and when Parasite touched Superman, he gained way more energy than he had from anyone before. From that point forward, leeching metahuman powers became his new obsession. Number 8. Solomon Grundy. Cyrus Gold lived a pretty miserable life. His father, Gold Sr., had moved to Gotham City to gain fame and fortune, and failed miserably. The elder Gold began to use his family as a way to vent off the hate he felt towards his superiors. For years, the young Cyrus Gold was mistreated, coming to a head when his mother packed her belongings, kissed him goodbye, and abandoned him alone with his horrible father. Not too much later, Cyrus snuck down to the docks to watch his father work when a crate fell on top of Cyrus Gold's father, taking him out of the picture instantly. Now, Cyrus Gold was all alone. Forced to survive on nothing, he swore to himself to make his own riches and power. And miraculously, a mysterious stranger offered Cyrus the deal of a lifetime. He could become rich and powerful if he only served the stranger until the day he died. Cyrus Gold shook the stranger's hand, and what do you know? He soon became wealthy and powerful, but by ways not very honest. He took people's lives, including his mother and various people who had bullied him in the past. He stole, and he became a horrible mobster, notorious for dumping the bodies of his victims in the waters of Slaughter Swamp. During this period, Cyrus somehow got married and had a little boy and a little girl as well. Initially, they were a happy family, but Cyrus became a worse and worse husband until, in a fit of rage, Cyrus took his wife's life. A mob formed and chased him into the swamps. Now, Cyrus didn't want to go by the mob's hands, and subsequently, he stuck himself through the heart, sinking into the cursed waters of Slaughter Swamp. Now, the swamp, filled with unknown acids and chemicals, bonded to the preserving corpse of Cyrus Gold, fusing his body through time with wood, stone, and pretty much anything else that was unlucky enough to fall into the swamp. 50 years later, after his passing, something happened. In the dead of night, a moaning was heard. The waters rippled and parted as a hideously decayed white hand reached out. That night, from the remains of a selfish and evil man, came a hulking avatar of the Grey known only as Solomon Grundy, naming himself after a famous poem. That was a long one, I'm sorry.
Number 7. Captain Marvel. First appearing in 1940's Whiz Comics number 2, Billy Batson was an orphan living on the mean streets. One day, a strange man in a trench coat approached him and told the young boy to follow him into an abandoned subway station. He did, and the man revealed himself to be a wizard, and took Billy to the Rock of Eternity. The wizard Shazam told Billy that he had been chosen to be the wizard's champion, and gave him the power to transform into a manly superhero who had the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Atlas, and the speed of Mercury. He could transform whenever he used the magic word Shazam. So, remember kids, if a strange man ever approaches you and asks you to follow him into an abandoned building, go with him. He is probably a wizard who wants to give you powers. Billy's origin has had a few alterations over the years, but the broad strokes are pretty much unchanged. What has changed over the years is his name. After Fawcett Comics was sued by the company that would become DC for alleged copyright infringement, they claimed Captain Marvel was a ripoff of Superman. Captain Marvel was cancelled until DC bought the character and decided to bring him back. By that time, Marvel Comics had their own Captain Marvel, and though DC was allowed to keep calling the character Captain Marvel, the book had to be renamed Shazam. Eventually, it was decided it was simpler if they simply called Billy Shazam, though his name will apparently soon be changed to simply the Captain. Billy's origin is great as it is the ultimate child's wish fulfillment power fantasy. While children in comics at the time were relegated to sidekick roles, Billy was able to be the strong hero anytime he wanted with just the utterance of a magic word. His origin does a great job of tapping into a really primal desire, and it's one of my favorites. Number 6. Iron Man. Tony Stark was a wealthy weapons designer who was kidnapped by radicals. In the attack, shrapnel was lodged in his chest that would result in him dying within a week. His captors lied and told him that if he designed weapons for them, they would give him a life-saving surgery. Tony knew they were lying, but played for time, creating a metal chest plate that acted like a pacemaker, keeping him alive. Him and his fellow captive, Yinsen, secretly created a robot mech suit so that they could escape, but as it was charging up, their captors came to check on them. Yinsen sacrificed himself to allow Tony to survive, and Tony used his first Iron Man suit to take out the cell and escaped back to America. He soon decided to become a superhero, but kept his identity secret for much of his history by claiming that Iron Man was actually his bodyguard. It's an interesting origin that has aged really well, all things considered, with it having a lot of thematic weight, tackling the idea of the consequences of the military-industrial complex, and Tony being one of Marvel's most flawed heroes. Number 5. Daredevil. Matt Murdock was the son of a boxer named Batlin Jack Murdock. Jack wanted his son to have a better life than him, and forbid him from ever fighting, making him study as much as possible instead. His unwillingness to fight earned him the ironic nickname Daredevil from his bullies. One day, Matt saw a blind man crossing the street and about to be hit by a truck. Matt heroically pushed him out of the way, but was struck himself. The truck was carrying a radioactive isotope, which got in Matt's eyes, blinding him, but granting him heightened senses that allowed him to do incredible feats. He trained to be an incredible fighter and acrobat in secret, and grew up to be a lawyer. His father was paid to throw a boxing match, but decided to win the match and was killed by a villain called the Fixer. Matt took on the Daredevil persona to avenge his father's death and defend the people of Hell's Kitchen. In the 80s, Frank Miller reworked Matt's origin a bit, introducing elements like a blind mentor named Stick, but overall, this relatively unique origin stuck, giving everyone one of Marvel's coolest heroes, while also providing representation for disabled people. Number 4. The Hulk. While testing his gamma bomb for the US military, Professor Bruce Banner realized that a teenager had wandered onto the test site, so he got him to safety, but was caught in the blast himself. This changed him so that whenever he became angry, he would transform into the Hulk, a giant green, or gray, rage monster. The monster is frequently misunderstood and chased by the military, resulting in destructive rampages from the creature, but he has also tackled his fair share of supervillains, saving the world several times. The Hulk has changed a lot over the years, going from gray to green in his first few appearances due to printer issues, being transformed by the setting sun in his original stories, then using a gamma ray machine to control the transformations, and eventually having them be triggered by emotional stimuli. But the cause of Bruce's powers has remained consistent in the many years of the comics, with its atomic Frankenstein Frankenstein meets Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde themes, providing Marvel with one of its most unique and interesting characters. Number 3, Spider-Man. We're in the top 3, but really, any of these next ones could be number 1 depending on your personal preference, due to each of them being absolutely iconic. When a teenager named Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider, he was granted spider powers, which he decided to use for personal gain, spending time as a wrestler and a television personality. One night, a thief ran past Spidey, and Spider-Man decided not to stop him, thinking it wasn't his problem. In a strange coincidence, the robber broke into Peter's home, resulting in the death of Peter's Uncle Ben. Spider-Man went after the crook, and upon recognizing him, was racked with guilt that his inaction resulted in an innocent life being lost. He vowed to be a hero and realized that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. All of this is present in his first appearance in Amazing Fantasy number 15 from 1962, and has remained virtually unchanged due to how strong it is. The idea of having the catalyst of the hero's heroics be his fault adds a layer of guilt to the proceedings that helps define Spidey as a character, and it really doesn't get much better than this. Number 2, Batman. When Bruce Wayne was a child, he and his parents were walking home one night when they were confronted by a robber. The robber, later named Joe Chill, shot Bruce's parents, leaving them dead on the pavement in front of the traumatized young boy. He made a vow to dedicate his life to fighting crime in Gotham City and spent his formative years training his mind and body to be the ultimate crime fighter. When he was grown, he was almost ready, but needed some way to strike fear into the hearts of criminals, as he knew that they were a superstitious and cowardly lot. At that moment, a bat flew through his window, and he was inspired to become Batman. Over the years, this origin has been expanded upon, and his time training has been more fleshed out, but that's his origin, and it's perfect. It's dark and gothic and perfectly suits the character. It is so ingrained in our public consciousness at this point that we're kind of sick of seeing it, or even hearing about it whenever the character brings it up in media. At this point, you could just have Batman show up and never mention why he does it, and everyone would still know, and that's the mark of a strong origin. Number 1, Superman. When the planet Krypton was about to be destroyed, one child was placed in a rocket and sent to Earth so that he might survive. Once on Earth, this child was raised by a kindly couple who taught him right from wrong. When he grew up, he decided to use his powers for good and be a superhero. Disguised as mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent, whenever trouble strikes, he becomes Superman. This origin was present in its broad strokes with the character's first appearance in 1938's Action Comics number 1, which features the doomed planet and sent to Earth in a rocket elements. A year later, in Superman number 1, the story was expanded upon, introducing the Kents who took him in. And in the years since, the origin has been reinterpreted and expanded upon, but all of the initial elements are still present. Although, in her first appearance, Clark's mom is named Mary, which is funny because in the years since, they've made a pretty big deal about her name being Martha! I think this origin is one of my favorites due to how classic it is, but also the fact that it is essentially just the Old Testament story of Moses, showing how storytelling and myth has evolved over the years while still having similar themes show up over and over again.
Kicking off the list at number 10 is the Ultimate Red Skull. In the Ultimate Universe, Steve Rogers and his girlfriend at the time, Gail Richards, shared a sweet night of romance together way back in 1945, just before he went and got himself popsicled. 9 months later, out popped a sweet baby that the government decided needed to be kept a secret. They took the boy into foster care on a military base, training him to become a super soldier to take the place of his missing and frozen father. He soon became stronger and even more tactically skillful than Captain America was, but even though he seemed to be the perfect soldier, Rogers' son had in reality been carefully planning his escape. Now fast forward to 1963 when he was finally at the age of 17, and the son went off the handle, removing all the doctors and soldiers at his facility of their lives. If you didn't gather that this guy was absolutely insane, he also used a kitchen knife to remove the skin from his own head, officially and literally becoming the Red Skull. In rebellion against the system that created him, he becomes a mentally unstable assassin and tries to eventually steal Reed Richards' plans for the Cosmic Cube in order to use it to change history so he could grow up with his father. It was absolutely psychotic up until that very last point. Number 9. Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom was the child of Romani people living in Latveria. His mother was a sorceress, and after her passing at the hands of Mephisto, resulting in her soul being held hostage by the Hell Lord, and the later passing of his father, Victor began to study her books, teaching himself the dark arts, while also developing a keen scientific mind which made him a legendary scientist and inventor at a very young age. This led to him being tracked down by the US military and offered further education in the United States. It was here that he met Reed Richards, and the two became intellectual rivals. Doom wanted nothing more than to save his mother from the hold of Mephisto, so he became obsessed with developing a machine that could project the astral form of a being into other dimensions, seeing it as a way to free his mother's soul from Mephisto. One day, Reed Richards went into Doom's dorm without permission and saw that he was working on the device, but Reed saw it as an unstable dimensional portal to an unknown realm and pointed out all the ways that it wouldn't work. Doom refused to listen since he was peed off at Reed for going into his dorm and looking at his stuff, but also because Doom's plans were based on an understanding of the supernatural that Reed just didn't appreciate. Reed, however, was right, and the machine ended up blowing up in Doom's face, literally, causing him to be disfigured. Despite that initial failure, through magic and other means, once a year, every single year, Doom would challenge Mephisto for the fate of his mother's soul, and he almost always loses. Number 8. Ultimate Mr. Sinister. Again, in the Ultimate Universe, Mr. Sinister is reimagined as a former bioengineer who specialized in urban stealth and mind-altering substances to create a super soldier who could evade any form of detection and hypnotically persuade others. Unfortunately, his superiors refused to allow Nathaniel Essex to test his research on human subjects, so he experimented on himself and acquired superhuman powers. But he also became a schizophrenic street thug with a white tank top, weird tattoos, and a proclivity for gunning down mutants to please his Lord Apocalypse. But his Lord Apocalypse isn't even real and is just a hallucination slash an effigy Sinister has constructed out of trash. This Lord Apocalypse inside of Sinister's head would preach about ushering in a, quote, final age of mutant dominance or the end of the world. But to do so, Sinister apparently had to remove 10 innocent mutants from existence. 4 issues of the X-Men chasing down a delusional mutant murderer were some of the best from the Ultimate X-Men's extended run.
Number 7. Rogue. Well, when it comes to Rogue, she's a pretty tragic and honestly pretty wild backstory. Initially, we knew her as a villain in the comics, but this wouldn't last too long, with Rogue eventually leaving her adoptive mother's sides and joining the X-Men. From the beginning of her origins, Rogue's backstory has been pretty wild. She was initially born into a hippie commune out in the wilderness. Her mother ended up disappearing in a mystical ritual when she was young, which left Anna Marie to be raised by her stern Aunt Carrie, her mother Priscilla's sister, and her often absent father, Owen. Eventually, Anna Marie would run away from home, gaining the nickname of Rogue because, you know, she kept to herself, which would eventually also become her codename as a super. She would end up being taken in by Mystique and her wife Destiny, with the two villainesses becoming, you guessed it, Rogue's adoptive mothers. Initially, Rogue's powers manifested during her first kiss with her childhood crush, Cody Robbins. As a result, Cody's life energy was drained from the physical contact and he was left comatose. Thanks to this very traumatizing experience, for years, Rogue struggled to control her powers, often choosing to wear clothes that fully covered her body for fear of accidentally hurting those closest to her. It wasn't until recently in the comics that she managed to gain better control over her mutant abilities when she finally confronted her fears, realizing that it was actually her own fear that had been preventing her from controlling her powers the whole time. Number 6. Oracle. When you think about it, Oracle's origins are pretty insane. I still can't believe this happened, considering the story that her origin comes from is not even fully canon. Oracle is Barbara Gordon, and we aren't talking about Barbara Gordon's initially confusing connection to Commissioner Jim Gordon and her origin as Batgirl here, but instead her transformation from Batgirl to Oracle with her Oracle origin. This all went down in Killing Joke, initially intended to be a one-off story that was not part of the main continuity canon, and for the most part, it really isn't. However, in the story, Barbara Gordon is visiting with her father, Jim Gordon. Dressed as a civilian, she answers the door and is shot through the spine by the Joker. And for some reason, this is the part of the story that was kept and incorporated into canon. The silver lining is it gave us Oracle, I suppose, which is a super cool character, but the unfortunate thing is it created a lot of trauma and extra struggle for Babs, with her also having to retire as Batgirl for quite some time. Number 5. Red Hood. We're not talking about Jason Todd's origins as Robin here, instead we're talking about his origin as Red Hood. And I know that some may consider Red Hood to be more a villain at times or anti-hero, but 1. Anti-heroes are still also heroes, and 2. I would consider Todd's Red Hood more of a straight up hero right now than, well, anything else. I mean, he did switch from guns to a crowbar, it's still pretty brutal, but hey, progress! Jason Todd became the Red Hood after he was believed to have been killed by the Joker. First of all, this death was actually voted on by fans, which is a pretty wild marketing strategy and pretty crazy that that's part of this origin. And after he died, his death was considered to be one of the actual mainstay deaths in comics, with the 3 permanent deaths in comics at one point being considered to be Uncle Ben, Bucky Barnes, and of course Jason Todd. Evidently not so permanent, as 2 out of 3 of those characters have now, at this point in time, ended up returning, albeit, you know, after a long period, I will say, of staying dead, unlike most other fallen heroes and characters. Jason returned, however, as the villain Red Hood. In the story, it was explained that he was revived via time spent in basically the Lazarus pits, being taken in and trained by Talia al Ghul and the League of Assassins. That's kind of like how he recovered and how he became Red Hood a little bit. However, do you even know how any of that was made possible? What was actually a change made to the universe that was one of many explained by Superboy Prime punching reality. Yeah, even more bizarre, the punch actually happened in terms of the comics continuity, in terms of their release dates, after Todd returned. But that's explained by the fact that Superboy Prime's punch actually affected all of reality throughout time. So while it did happen afterward in terms of when the comics were released, it affected the past, which means Jason Todd actually came back to life 6 months after his death in the adjusted canon. Which would actually even be like way back when. So people were like, but didn't this happen after? And it's like, yes, but like this actually doesn't even, it affects way in the past. Really? Oh, Superboy Prime, punch in reality. Number 4. Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly is a superhero who we would often come to know mainly as Scarlet Spider. But before that, we actually just knew him for a while as Spider-Man. He is the clone of Peter Parker, who was created by the Jackal, although there was a period of time where Peter and Ben were not sure which one of them was the clone, and it was even believed that Ben may actually be the original, with Peter being the clone. Beyond that, Ben Reilly, while being created by Miles Warren's Jackal and tormented by the villain, would also at one point go on to adopt the name for himself, becoming the Jackal, which is pretty messed up when you think about everything that's happened to Ben Reilly. Number 3. ROBOTMAN. Cliff Steele is DC's ROBOTMAN. For those unfamiliar, he is one of the mainstays on DC's oddball superhero team, the Doom Patrol. Whether we're talking about the live-action adaptation or the comic book origin for this character, both are honestly pretty similar and pretty weird. Basically, Cliff Steele was a NASCAR driver, additionally in the comics an obsessive thrill seeker, not exclusively a race car driver alone, and during a car accident his body ends up being destroyed. With his brain still surviving, however, his life was saved by Niles Calder, who gave him a cybernetic body, which is how he became ROBOTMAN. Unfortunately, a much more rudimentary robot body though than other superheroic cyborgs like, well, Cyborg. In the live-action series Doom Patrol, Cliff's origin is made even more unbelievable, and we learn that this version of the accident happened not on the track, but after the race while on the way home. Cliff had been having an affair and his wife found out, but at the same time he also found out that his wife had found out, and then so she had had an affair and she let him know kind of in the worst time possible. She revealed this to him during his race, causing him to almost get in a life-threatening car crash. The two, however, after the race decided to renew their commitment to one another and ultimately try to salvage their marriage. I guess you know, a near-death experience can do that to you. While on their way home with their young daughter Clara in the back seat, Cliff ended up getting into an accident tragically with a large logging truck. The accident cost his wife her life, Cliff his body, and left his daughter alive but severely traumatized. Even more wild, in the show, we'd actually later learn that Cliff getting into this accident was kind of all part of Niles Calder's experiments as he sought to find a way to become immortal. Now that is unbelievable. Number 2. Longshot. Longshot is the son of Shatterstar, and he's from Mojo World, so he's pretty much as weird as it gets just with that. Longshot was basically created as a clone of Shatterstar who ended up being sent back in time to the Mojoverse by Mephisto. But it also gets even weirder for this character when you factor in his jumps back and forth from the Mojoverse to Earth and back again, and it gets even weirder when you factor in Shatterstar's origins. Number 1. Shatterstar. As I said, to really appreciate the mind-blowing nature of Longshot's origins, you need to know Shatterstar. So Shatterstar is actually the biological son of Longshot and another mutant with a weird origin story, Dazzler, who we talked about on part 2 of this series. Which of course means that Shatterstar and Longshot are in essence one another's fathers, in a way, with both their origins being tied up in what I would call a time paradox. I think that's what that is for sure. Longshot is Shatterstar's father, but after traveling back in time, Shatterstar's DNA would be taken and used to create Longshot, in essence also making him Longshot's genetic father. So yeah, they're both each other's fathers, they both exist, and they're both really confusing.
At number 10 is Black Bolt. Black Bolt, aka Blackagar Boltagon, yup, that's his actual name, had an undeniably tough start. Exposed to the Terrigen mists while still in the womb, he gained a staggering power, a voice capable of toppling buildings and even obliterating entire worlds. His arrival into the world wasn't subtle. His mere cries crumbled the structure around him when he was born. But from the moment of birth, Black Bolt was treated not as a person, but as a weapon of mass destruction. Isolation was his fate until the age of 19, and he was forbidden to utter a single word due to his uncontrollable power, spending the first 2 decades of his life in absolute silence. Now let's take a moment here to appreciate the image of a grown Black Bolt decked out in a superhero outfit sitting in his isolation chamber. I mean, come on dude, casual attire is an option. I mean, even the Joker doesn't wear purple at the Arkham Asylum. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support this channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Really appreciate it. At number 9 is Rorschach. Rorschach's backstory reads like a descent into a nightmarish abyss. A childhood entrenched in squalor, with a mother who lived a life of night walking set the tone for his grim trajectory. Bullied at school, Rorschach's retaliation marked his entry into the world of crime. But it was a chance encounter with a shifting, enigmatic dress that catalyzed his transformation. Crafting his ink-blotted mask, he embraced the persona of Rorschach. In the world of vigilantism, he crossed paths with Night Owl and the other Watchmen, but a horrifying case left an indelible scar. Investigating a girl's abduction, he stumbled upon an unspeakable brutality. Her remains had been fed to dogs. His retribution was unflinching, handcuffing the perpetrator amidst flames, and a gruesome ultimatum pushed the boundaries of his morality. As time went on, the line between Rorschach and Walter Korvax blurred. His mask became his face, obscuring his true self. In a twisted metamorphosis, Korvax perished and Rorschach emerged. This brutal origin story epitomizes the haunting complexity of Watchmen's characters, where darkness begets something darker. At number 8 is Red Hood. The only thing more tragic than Jason Todd's backstory is the fact that the decision to end his character was the result of a vote by fans via telephone poll. Born into Gotham and raised as the second ever Robin to Bruce's Batman, Todd's journey into heroism wasn't paved by rose petals. He met a tragic fate at the hands of the Joker when Batman's notorious nemesis whacked him mercilessly with a crowbar and left him strapped next to a bomb. Todd's demise marked a stark divergence from your typical heroic tragedy. Miraculously surviving his grim fate via some mystic shenanigans, probably involving the Lazarus Pit, he returned with a newfound edginess, embracing a more anti-hero persona as the Red Hood, which, by the way, is the Joker's original moniker. This gritty transformation challenges the traditional archetype of a superhero, delving into the complexities of vengeance, morality, and blurred lines. It seems that the darkest of beginnings can give rise to the extraordinary, if not unconventional, champions.
Number 7. Earth 17 Overman. On Earth 17, that appeared very briefly in Animal Man issue number 23, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe is called Overman, and he was the first hero, with all the other heroes being spawns of his own DNA. That seems pretty normal for a comic book. It feels very The Boys. But Just like the boys, things get really weird. Overman ends up catching some kind of promiscuously transmitted disease from another person, which somehow drives him completely insane. Overman destroys Earth-17's Justice League and reduces the entire world to rubble. And that was all before he gets his filthy paws on an incredibly powerful Doomsday device that he intends to use to wipe Earth-17 out completely. But before he does that, he is temporarily transported to the main DC universe. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, which seems like an effort by DC to destroy such a naughty Superman story. They even created different, less weird, but still evil iterations of Overman, like an Overman who became allied with the Axis powers in World War II. But the internet, we never forget that kind of thing, you weirdos. Number 6. DEXSTAR. It's true, the Red Lantern of Sector 2814, DEXSTAR, is an irrationally rage-filled kitten cat, and he's scary, but it's all because he really loved his owner, which is kinda sweet. DEXSTAR's origin shows the cat Dexter with his owner when she is attacked by robbers who broke into her home. While Dexter tried his best to scratch the attackers, they ended up bringing a close to the life of Dexter's owner. When the police showed up on the scene though, Dexter was kicked out into the streets so he wouldn't contaminate the scene. So this cat lost his owner and his home. That's bad enough, but then two sickos from the streets found Dexter when he was trying to sleep, put him in a sack, and threw him into a river. This unbelievable and unfortunate sequence of events filled this poor little kitty with enough pure, unbridled rage that it caught the attention of Atrocitus, who called out to him and made Dexter a Red Lantern. With this newfound power of the Red Lantern ring, the Rage Kitty exacted sweet revenge on the sickos who sacked him and flew to say goodbye to his owner one last time, saying, in his little cat language, "I find who hurt you, I kill, I good kitty." Number 5. The Joker. There are many variations of the Joker's origin story, with no one version being officially accepted. And that's because he either doesn't remember the real one, doesn't want to tell anyone, or is just so insane that he makes up a new one every single time. It's part of what makes the Joker so compelling. The most popular of his origin stories, though, sees him as a civilian named Jack. Jack leaves behind a career as a chemical engineer to go into stand-up comedy. When he fails miserably, he turns to a gang of criminals in order to support his pregnant wife. The criminals name him Red Hood and set up a robbery at a chemical plant, threatening and or taking the life of his family in order to force Jack into working with them. At the plant, the gang are taken down by security, and in the terror of seeing Batman as he fled away, Red Hood / Jack falls into a vat of chemicals. When he emerged being drastically physically altered, he also ends up having a complete and very drastic psychotic breakdown and focuses obsessively on Batman for the rest of his life. Number 4. Monsieur Malat and the Brain. When I tell you that a super intelligent French militant gorilla named Monsieur Malat and a disembodied brain belonging to a French scientific genius and master criminal are not only the primary leaders of the Brotherhood of Evil, but are also in a relationship together, then you know this is gonna be wild. So, Monsieur Malat and the Brain, who were villains to both the Doom Patrol and the Teen Titans, first appeared in Doom Patrol number 86 in 1964. Brain was once a scientist who experimented on the gorilla who would become Malat, increasing Malat's intelligence. Unfortunately, an accident injured Ernst, the scientist, and Malat had to remove Ernst's brain and place it in a technological holding device to keep him alive and able to communicate. And thus, the villainous duo were born. The two are almost always together, with Malat usually carrying around the brain. Their story and even the characters themselves are odd to say the least, but so are the Doom Patrol, so it all just kind of makes sense in the end, doesn't it? Number 3. Bane. Bane was born inside the feared Pena Duro prison on Santa Prisca, an island in the Caribbean Sea, after his father, Edmund Dorrance, escaped and had the corrupt government transfer his life sentence to his unborn child. That alone is just so messed up. This child was forced to serve his father's prison sentence, is named Bane by a prison warden after he took the first of many lives while still growing up. Bane spends his time in prison building himself into the perfect specimen of physical and mental ability, teaching himself strategy, philosophy, languages, and mathematics while also turning his body into the example of peak fitness and strength. Bane becomes the, quote, king of the prison and is its most feared inmate. Being such an incredible specimen of a human being, Bane is selected for use in a super soldier experimental program, being injected with a lethal substance called venom. But unlike any other before him, Bane not only survives, but he finds the venom further enhances his already outstanding physical abilities, but with the caveat that it must be taken every 12 hours. To help that, a system of tubes is installed on Bane to pump venom directly into his system. It's not too long after that Bane sets his sights on dominating Gotham City and its bat-themed protector. In at number 2, it's Cheetah. Cheetah was initially a famous archaeologist named Dr. Barbara Ann Minerva. She was a bit, I don't know what's the word, quirky? With an obsessive love of artifacts and not much of a care for other human beings. But still, she wasn't exactly evil. Not at first. Minerva stumbled upon an ancient tribe in Africa that was protected by a female guardian with the powers of a cheetah. Super cool. So cool that when she is told the legend of this female hero by a witch doctor, she believes she can become the next cheetah. To do this, Minerva has to become the bride of a plant god by the name of Kartaga. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. She fulfills all of the requirements to become his bride, ingesting a mixture of human blood, berries, and his leaves, but while things seem to be going smoothly, she was not told the key requirement, that she needs to be a virgin. Since Minerva is not a virgin, she is instead cursed to suffer severe pain when she's in human form and have an insatiable bloodlust whenever she turns into Cheetah. And finally, in at number 1, it's Armless Tiger Man. If any of you know me, then you know Gustav Hertz was going to make this list. Gustav worked in a mechanical laboratory in Munich, Germany during the 1940s, but unfortunately for Hertz, one day his arms got caught in a machine and had to be amputated. While this is a horrible thing to happen to anyone, Gustav did survive the experience, and he was later given reading material on how to operate day to day without arms, instead using his mouth and feet to complete daily tasks. Turns out that he was really good at this. Hertz developed ridiculous skill in using his teeth and feet. He even took things a couple steps further. He sharpened his teeth into fangs that he could use as weapons and tools, and he even developed above average levels of strength and dexterity in his jaw, legs, and toes, allowing him to bend steel with his mouth, kick really hard, and throw daggers with his toes. He ends up proving how capable he was as a World War II enemy of the hero Angel and an enemy of Wakanda, where he was completely destroyed by that era's Black Panther. I will talk about Armless Tiger Man whenever I have the chance, and I am not sorry about it. And with Armless Tiger Man out of the way, we can finally bring this video to an end. Kicking off the list at number 10 is Ultra Boy. This one is interesting, as you'd be totally forgiven for laughing at this character, but then you'd have to say sorry, as you just insulted an incredibly powerful dude. Ultra Boy, or as he is known in his civilian guise, Joe Na, possesses many of the same superpowers as Superboy, including superhuman speed, strength, flight, stamina, breath, vision, and invulnerability, which he gained from being swallowed by a massive space energy beast, which is essentially a giant space whale, hence the biblical Jonah name. While he was inside the energy beast's stomach, the radiation inside altered Joe Na to give him superpowers. Now the only issue with Joe Na, and it's a big one, is that he can only use one power at a time. This means that if he wants to fly through space at super speed, he must wear a spacesuit to survive in the cold vacuum, or when using his power for super strength, he is not invulnerable and can therefore get tired, feel muscular pain, or even pull a muscle. Joe Na can switch these abilities almost instantly, but needs to make the conscious choice to do so, which honestly sounds kind of exhausting to me. I don't know. Number 9. Puck. The Alpha Flight member known as Puck was at one point literally just a little person who pushed himself to turn his body into an almost perfect physical specimen, able to lift hundreds of pounds and fight as well as his fellow Alpha Flighters. But this was before his Alpha Flight days. He had tons of adventures, and his pretty basic but mysterious backstory added to his likability. But that ain't the dumb part. The dumb part came later on, when it was revealed that Puck was actually much older than he seemed and was not actually born as a little person. Apparently, Puck used to be 7 feet tall and was a mercenary and adventurer who was born near the start of the 20th century. As a merc, he was hired to steal the Black Blade of Baghdad, and he totally got it. But then, it unleashed an ancient magical being known as Black Razor. In order to defeat the being, Puck sucked him into his own body, becoming immortal in the process, but also losing half of his height and being trapped in the form of a little person. Why couldn't he just be a little person? I don't know. Number 8. Elongated Man. When Ralph Dibny was a tiny little Ralph Dibny, he saw a contortionist at a carnival and he was instantly down to be able to be like that guy. Everyone has their own thing, okay? And for Ralph, his thing was trying to figure out how someone could twist and fold their body into all sorts of shapes like that. Obsessed with learning the secrets of the contortionists for years and years, Ralph figured out that all the contortionists he observed drank the same drink. Now, it's not some crazy formula, it's not some kind of tea, but it was actually a popular soft drink known as Gingold. Now, Ralph knew for the most part that it was just a coincidence that they all drank the same drink, but that doesn't mean he wasn't gonna bet everything on it. Ralph literally taught himself chemistry, which should be the superpower itself, and he used his newly found chemistry skills to create a super concentrated extract from the fruit that was the basis and heart for Gingold, the Gingo fruit. And what do you know? The super concentrated extract allowed him to make any part of his body stretch to ridiculous degrees. What's that I hear you say? Why yes, this does make no sense.
And at 7, the Cloud. After joining the Defenders, Cloud struggled with understanding their true origins. Complicating matters, they developed feelings for their teammate Moondragon, who was subtly using telepathic signals to manipulate others. Cloud's confusion led them to shapeshift into Danny Milligan's form, hoping to be a more suitable form for Moondragon, but this adds to the mystery surrounding Cloud's identity and just life in general, because they are a freaking cloud that will shapeshift into naked humans. In time, Cloud regained their complete memories and led the Defenders on a space mission to prevent the Star Thief from harming their family, and with their memories restored, Cloud embraced their rightful place in the cosmos, finding clarity and purpose once again. Most recently, now preferring the pronoun they, Cloud reappeared as a member of Doctor Strange's new Defenders. While the Defenders were in the fourth cosmos, Cloud stayed behind and journeyed into the mystery. Cloud then encountered a new version of the Defenders as they were traveling through the mystery, specifically the land of couldn't be, shouldn't be. And at 6, the Creeper. Jack Ryder, a former resident of Gotham City, finds himself fired from his political talk show when he fearlessly criticized his sponsors and refused to back down. Recognizing his detective skills, Chief of Network Security Bill Brain offered Ryder a job as an investigator. Ryder's first assignment involved locating Dr. Yats, a scientist captured by a local gangster, Angel Devlin, who is collaborating with communist powers. To infiltrate Devlin's masquerade party, Ryder seeks a disguise at a costume shop where he improvises a unique outfit with yellow lights, green trunks, red gloves and boots, with yellow makeup, a green wig. It's really weird. He even has like a sheepskin rug as a cape. Ryder completes his bold ensemble, and then at the party he confronts Devlin's henchmen and rescues Dr. Yats, but not without being injured. In a twisted turn of fate though, Dr. Yats injects Ryder with a chemical serum that enhances his healing, strength, and stamina, but also implants a tiny device under his skin capable of rearranging molecular structures and rendering his suit basically invisible until needed. But the comic explanation is that he can switch between his skin and his costume that he wore to the party at will, which is all kinds of strange. Halfway through into number 5, Ultra Boy. Jonah, known as Ultra Boy and hailing from the planet of Rimbor, is a member of the Legion of Superheroes with a wide array of powers, but he can only use one of them at a time due to his physical limitations. Originally, Joe was part of a gang called the Emerald Dragons on the seedy world of Rimbor. While traveling in his space speedster, not that kind of speedster, he was swallowed by an energy blast, a monstrous whale-like creature that devoured any life form in its path. Luckily, the Galactic Patrol cruiser saved him by cutting open the creature with a ray, but the radiation charged Joe's body, granting him incredible abilities like X-ray vision and more. Embracing his newfound powers, he became Ultra Boy and joined law enforcement efforts, leading him to be recommended for the Legion of Superheroes. At some point, Joe was thrown back in time to the 20th century and teamed up with Superboy, merging their minds to become Reflecto, but eventually he returned to the 30th century and continued his adventures as Ultra Boy. And at 4, Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze's parents were famous motorcycle stars alongside Craig Crash Simpson, who became like a father figure to Johnny after their death. Taught by Crash, Johnny was expected to carry on the legacy, but he resisted, disappointing his girlfriend Roxanne. When Crash failed fell terminally ill, Johnny delved into the occult in desperation to save him. He unwillingly summoned Mephisto, whom he struck a deal with to cure Crash's cancer in exchange for his eternal servitude in hell. Despite the deal though, Crash died shortly after, attempting a dangerous stunt. Grieving and seeking to honor his foster father, Johnny attempted the same stunt but nearly lost his soul to Mephisto, and then he becomes Ghost Rider. Getting close to the end, in number 3, Fatman the Human Flying Saucer. Van Crawford, a wealthy owner of hobby shops and a hobby expert, stumbled upon a crashed flying saucer one day. To show gratitude for his assistance, the shape-shifting alien inside granted Van a drink that tasted like a chocolate milkshake, but was actually the substance used by the alien's race to transform into saucers. Now, possessing that same power, Van adopted the persona of Fatman and fought evil with his newfound abilities. Along the way, he gained a teenage sidekick of Tin Man, who could coat himself in tin because of magic, and Fatman's adventures led him to become the temporary king of Octagonia, a title obtained by spending $25,000, oblivious to the actual nature of the acquisition. If you're gonna be called Fatman the Human Flying Saucer and your only power is to turn into a flying saucer and you're other than that just rich? Weird. But ultimately, in at number 2, Doorman. Dermar Davis, an ordinary American youth, experienced a personal tragedy when his mother passed away during his college years. After completing his education, Dermar responded to Dr. Immortal's call for costumed adventurers to form a team, leading him to join the Great Lakes Avengers. As a mutant with a remarkable teleportation ability, he became an invaluable asset to the team, providing them with stealthy entrances and surprising attacks by creating openings into almost any structure. And the reason that this is weird is because, like, yeah, sure, he's a mutant, but a mutant that can become a door? That's weird even by mutant standards. There's a dude covered in eyeballs, for God's sakes. Doorman is a class 10 teleporter, okay, and if you're confused as to what that means, his body is a portal to the Dark Force dimension, allowing for people or items to pass through him and walk through any solid object that the Doorman is standing against. When creating a door through an object, Doorman is often surrounded by floating black spheres that create an outline of his body and like on the opposite side of any object, so they kind of know where they're coming through. But becoming a mutant that turns into doors? Yeah. And finally, in at number 1, Hindsight Lad. Initially met with skepticism by the other new warriors, Hindsight Lad proved his value when he rescued the team from the clutches of the Poison Memories. Utilizing Speedball's address book, he teamed up with the Night Thrasher to mount a successful rescue mission wherein the core members were captured and sent through time by the Sphinx. With the original New Warriors missing, Hindsight Lad and Bandit formed a new team of heroes called the New Warriors. Carlton LaForge, a computer nerd and misfit, discovered his neighbor Robbie Baldwin's secret identity as Speedball during an apartment crisis caused by Darkling's Dark Force. Carlton, a superhero enthusiast with no powers, demanded to join the team or he would expose Robbie. Reluctantly, Speedball and the New Warriors agreed, and Carlton officially became Hindsight Lad, who has no powers except the power of hindsight, being able to look back and say what they could have done differently.
Number 10, Hitmonkey. Hitmonkey. Oh man, I love Hitmonkey. Initially, Hitmonkey was just a monkey living up in the mountains until a human assassin wandered wounded into his clan. They took in the human and nursed him back to health. The monkey who had become Hitmonkey was nervous about the man's presence and at one point rebelled against his clan for their decision to continue to offer refuge to the assassin. Monkey violently struck out and was banished as a result. However, during his time away, he spotted other armed men in the wilderness and rushed back to warn his clan, but unfortunately he got there too late. They had all been killed in the attack, with the assassin also dying. Swearing to get revenge, Hitmonkey was born that day, as he wielded the assassin's guns and would continue to be guided by the spirit of the dead assassin, who helped him on his quest and also sought to resolve his own unfinished business through Hitmonkey. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love weird, wacky lists like this, click that subscribe button. We do a lot of cool stuff like this and you're not gonna want to miss it when it does pop up. Number 9, Green Lantern. In part 2, we talked about the original origin of Alan Scott's Green Lantern, but now we're gonna talk about the amazing and also unbelievable origin of one of the newer Green Lanterns, Sojourner Malene. Jo has a fascinating origin in the sense that she was chosen to become Green Lantern for a sector of space known only as the Far Sector. That's how far out it is. It does not have a designated number, it's just Far Sector. Also interesting and unique is that Jo's Green Lantern ring that she was given is a special kind that is basically self-charging, doesn't need a battery, making it perfect for cases out in remote areas of space. However, while this is a great strength and some would consider this ring to be like one of the strongest, it can also be somewhat of a weakness because it actually takes time to recharge by itself, meaning that Jo has to be a little bit more conservative and creative at times when using her powers in battle, being careful not to fully tap herself out unless, you know, she absolutely has to, but she has to make those choices. That's what makes it so exciting. Number 8. Elasti-Woman. Whether we're talking comics or the live-action Doom Patrol series, Elasti-Woman has a pretty interesting origin. She was initially a Hollywood actress, Rita Farr. In the Doom Patrol series, it's implied that she was cursed for being rude to locals while on set, falling into a body of water where she was exposed to a toxic gas that left her with the uncontrollable ability to shapeshift. Ultimately, this kinda ruined her career. In the comics, it was exposure to toxic gas from a volcano while on a shoot in Africa that gave her this ability, also, of course, ruining her career. She would end up joining Niles Calder's team of misfits known as the Doom Patrol. In the live-action series, Rita constantly struggles to control her abilities. In the comics, she also becomes the adopted mother of Garfield Logan's Beast Boy, who we often nickname Gar, after marrying Steve Dayton's Mento, another member of the Doom Patrol team.
Number 7. Killer Croc. As with most DC characters, Killer Croc, aka Waylon Jones, has two main origin stories, the pre- and post-Flashpoint origins, with some minor differences. Born in a slum in Tampa, Florida, Waylon was born with a congenital medical condition that caused him to have scaly, thick skin and reptilian features, which led to the Croc part of his name. This is true in both origins, although post-Flashpoint this condition was given a bit more depth as Waylon tried to scrub away the scales for years. Now, with his mother passing away from his birth and his father abandoning the little Croc, Waylon was raised by his aunt, but she had a bit of a problem with the drinky. As a teenager, Croc had no friends and was bullied for his medical condition, as is usually the case in a villain origin story. So, instead, Waylon grew up and found himself literally wrestling alligators as part of carnivals. Post-Flashpoint, this was the Gotham Circus, where he even came into contact with the Flying Graysons. This was where he earned the name Killer Croc, but carnivals aren't exactly swimming in the cash, and post-Flashpoint his boss was keeping his money, prompting Croc to bite off his arm. Croc soon realized that there was more money to be made in crime, so he set out to become Gotham's most powerful crime lord, taking out other rising criminals, gathering up some henchmen, and seizing control of the Tobacconists Club and or the Gotham City sewers, bringing him into conflict with the Batman. Number 6. Professor Zoom. Hunter Zolomon was already starting off life with a bit of a disadvantage, and that's because his dad was a notorious killer who lost his life to the police after taking the life of Hunter's mother. So yeah, it was pretty bad. Trying to move on with his life though, Hunter became obsessed with understanding the criminal mind, studying psychology and criminology in college, and eventually joining the FBI alongside his girlfriend, whom he later married. Nice. Unfortunately though, during one case, Hunter made a bad call regarding a criminal they were after, and it resulted in Ashley's father losing his life. Hunter actually was correct, but the whole thing was orchestrated by Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne. Ashley left Hunter, and the FBI terminated his employment, leaving Hunter with a damaged knee due to the case, and a cane for walking. After getting a job in Keystone City as a profiler, he was eventually paralyzed by Gorilla Grodd. After forming a relationship with Wally West, Hunter begged Flash to go back in time and change his life, but the speedster refused. Hunter took things into his own hands and stole the cosmic treadmill, which exploded, granting Hunter the power to live between the seconds of time and making him Zoom, the second Reverse Flash. Number 5. Superboy Prime. Superboy Prime was initially a normal child on an Earth known as Prime Earth that didn't really have any superheroes. Or they had superheroes in the exact same way that we do, in comic books and entertainment media. This young future supervillain was adopted by Jerry and Naomi Kent, who named him Clark, which was both Naomi's middle name and the fictional comic book character Superman in their world. Well, it turns out that Clark really was Kal-El, teleported to Earth Prime before the Krypton of this universe was destroyed when its sun went kaboom. Discovering his Kryptonian abilities thanks to the passing of Halley's Comet, while coincidentally dressed as Superman at a Halloween party, this Superboy left his Prime Earth reality shortly afterwards. As it happens, the Earth 1 Superman just happened to be passing by and asked him to join other heroes in protecting reality itself from the Anti-Monitor during the Crisis on Infinite Earths. His reward, along with Alexander Luthor Jr. of Earth 3, was a chance to escape to a heavenly pocket dimension where he doesn't age. Unfortunately, being able to watch the post-crisis Earth that was getting darker and darker without being able to be a part of it, losing his childhood, knowing that he could never grow up to be Superman, his idol of Earth 2, and feeling like the heroes of post-crisis Earth were absolute dog water, Superboy Prime became a pretty bitter guy. He escaped with Alexander and instigated the Infinite Crisis, and then he went on to be an incredibly despicable bad guy. Number 4. Doomsday. Doomsday is essentially just pure destruction. He was able to bring down the Justice League and take the life of Earth's premier hero, Superman, in his first appearance. Doomsday doesn't speak, he can't be reasoned with, and the only way to stop him is to beat him harder than he will beat you. That's because Doomsday was created on the planet Krypton as the ultimate life form, tested against that planet's harsh environment and eventually against the Kryptonians themselves. Doomsday's whole life cycle involves it being killed and then coming back stronger than whatever took it out. Over decades and decades that involved literal thousands of repeated deaths, Doomsday essentially became a nearly undefeatable monster with no other thought process beyond destroying everything in front of him and just moving on to the next thing. All he does is punch things to pieces, and the only way to stop him is to try and punch him to pieces however you can before he can punch you to pieces. Number 3. The Maestro Hulk. Maestro is the dystopian future version of the Hulk, the variant of Hulk that haunts his own dreams. He rules over the creatively named city, Dystopia, as an incredibly evil and immoral dictator. Years and years and years of radiation due to the nuclear conflict that spawned this dystopian future had made Maestro sick and villainous, as well as twice as strong as the base level Hulk, but with all the intelligence of Banner to boot. This bearded green behemoth has been a fan favorite character since his introduction in the Future Imperfect storyline, and his backstory, fighting the Human Torch, Dr. Doom, Namor the Submariner, and Abomination, is pretty intense, and it's a super fun read. Not to mention his debut where he fights the Incredible Hulk and defeats him like it's absolutely nothing to him. Super cool, you should check it out. Number 2. Vulcan. The third and youngest Summers brother, Gabriel Summers, has been used by multiple different parties since his birth. His mother, Catherine Summers, had her life taken by the Shi'ar Emperor D'Ken as a punishment for his father, Christopher Summers' own actions. He was basically paying for his father's crimes, which sucks. The Shi'ar took Gabriel and artificially aged him up and essentially used him back on Earth. So he was robbed of his childhood, which essentially meant that Vulcan has a tendency to act like a huge brat sometimes. It's a big old baby. After being saved and mentored by Moira McTaggart, Vulcan was drafted into an early team of Professor X's X-Men that got almost completely perished at the hands of Krakoa. Professor X then used his powers to wipe everyone's mind of the memory of this team of X-Men, which was incredibly messed up. Unbeknownst to Xavier though, Vulcan absorbed the energies of his teammates and was actually able to survive, spending years in Earth's orbit just kind of inert and floating there until the events of M-Day awoke him. After coming back and fighting the X-Men and Xavier for some understandable vengeance, Gabriel took off into space and essentially took control of the Shi'ar Empire, marrying the black sheep of the Shi'ar royal family and using his massive power to beat the royal guard, take the life of D'Ken, and place himself on the throne. And finally, in at number 1, it's Thanos. Look, I know we all love Thanos as a villain. He's terribly ruthless, massively intelligent, and sickeningly powerful. But my lord, is his origin messed up. Thanos was born on Titan, a moon of Saturn, and is technically an Eternal. Unfortunately though, Thanos was born with a deviant gene, which made him very different looking from the rest of the Titan Eternals, with purple thick hide-like skin and a much larger body. These differences caused Thanos' mom to try and change his life status from